Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now that we can clearly see the depth of the climate crisis, lithium, which is the basis for batteries used in most electric vehicles, might be called the most critical mineral on the planet. The International Energy Agency projects that the world will need 1,063 kilotons of lithium in 2040. That's 48 times the volume of lithium used in EVs and for electricity storage in 2020. So where will it come from? Our guest today is Jack Lifton, a physical chemist who has worked for the past 60 years on the purification of rare metals for the electronics and energy storage industries. He's the co-chairman of the Critical Minerals Institute, which is an international professional organization focused on battery and technology materials, as well as an advisor to One World Lithium, a lithium extraction technology company. One World Lithium has developed a lithium carbonation process that Jack suggests can produce more battery-grade material than the more heat and pressure-intensive approaches that we currently rely on. And when you use less heat and less pressure, you use less energy, so it produces fewer carbon dioxide emissions as you produce lithium. Lithium carbonation extracts the metal from brines through evaporation, precipitation, and purification steps. The process does not rely on mining, making it a more environmentally responsible option, but lithium brines are typically found in areas that are arid or semi-arid, where evaporation leaves behind concentrated lithium salts that can be processed. With the Inflation Reduction Act's requirement that 100% of materials used in EVs must be sourced within the U.S. in order to qualify for tax credits, there are concerning questions about whether we can meet the domestic demand for lithium. The New York Times reports that China produces 67% of the world's lithium at this time. Jack warns that the U.S. has underinvested in its engineering skills. And I quote here, "The contrasting trends of our U.S. laissez-faire approach versus the Chinese command economy has left a clear disparity in capacity. It's time to place a priority on what America can do to regain its place in science and technology for the common good and defense," unquote. The lithium supply, therefore, is full of questions. So let's jump in and find out what we can learn. You can learn more about Jack Lifton and the Critical Minerals Institute at criticalmineralsinstitute.com. That's all one word. No space, no dash, criticalmineralsinstitute.com. Welcome to the show, Jack. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us. So, Jack, you have been doing this for 60 plus years. You've seen a lot. Why is it this time different? Both because of the energy transition and because of the way that we're addressing critical minerals as a strategic issue for the first time.
Well, I was actually born just about a year before the United States entered World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So of course, I was just a child when the great society-changing technologies were developed between, let's say, 1945 and 1970.
Mm-hmm.
But I live in Detroit. Detroit, is said, was the arsenal of democracy, so they tell me. And what we never talked about critical materials except during wartime.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the interesting thing is that if you talk about critical materials during World War II or Korea,
mm-hmm.
Even Vietnam, which I remember quite well, those critical materials were what was necessary to make steel.
Yeah,
because steel is the structural backbone of our civilization. So I know from my own studying that in World War II, for example, sourcing tungsten was a major issue. And today, all that's remembered is there are some spy stories
mm-hmm.
about the spies battling each other in Portugal for tungsten ore. Okay, that they did. The Germans, us, the Brits, everybody was looking for tungsten to make stronger steel.
Well, do you see this time around as war-like in terms of our competition, for instance, with China, who's making 67% of the world's lithium? Or is this a new cooperative opportunity where we have to rethink how we trade?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm very, very concerned with the language people use today on critical materials. I believe that the only language they know is from war. And they talk about we're fighting the Chinese are weaponizing these materials. The fact is, those are foolish terms to use in a capitalist or free market or even controlled market world. What's happening here is competition. That's what it's all. It's not. I don't believe the Chinese really want to conquer Nevada, or that Americans think that Sichuan would make a great 51st state. I don't think any. I think that's nonsense. What's happening here, in my opinion, is that China has so rapidly developed its society from literally primitive third world to now the second largest economy in the world, and in my opinion, the premier manufacturing economy of this planet. And if you go back and you have any historical interest, okay, and perspective, you see that when the United States was the greatest manufacturing nation in the world, which was a very long period, people don't understand this. Prior to World War II, the United States was the leading economy of the world, but it was isolationist.
Yeah.
The British Empire was the premier nation of the world, but the United States economy was actually much more robust than that of the British Empire. So all of the Europeans ignored us, and the Japanese assumed that, well, they'll just cripple our fleet, and by the time we get it back together, they'll have solidified their control over what they call the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, which was a globalized marketplace. Okay, so all of this stuff has happened before, is what I'm getting at. And all that's new today is what things are critical, and that's based on the technologies we deploy in our society.
So history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And this time we have to rethink how we sing the melody.
That's right.
So how much lithium does the United States need to transition to the goal that we've established, 50% EV sales by 2030? And how much of that is, in your opinion, is actually accessible in that time frame?
What's happened here is that there's a mandate. There's a mandate by the ignorant policymakers that we convert 50% of the production of motor vehicles by 2030 to battery.
Can we do it? Can we do it?
No. But the point is, here's why. Let's split the difference and say 15 million vehicles. We need 7.5 million battery-powered vehicles. So 7.5 million battery-powered vehicles typically would use about 8 kilograms of lithium measured as metal in the battery, in a 100 kilowatt hour battery, which is typical, for example, of a Tesla Model 3.
Yeah.
So that's 60 million kilograms of lithium metal. That would be 360,000 metric tons. The current world production of that material is about, I believe, this year, maybe 700,000 tons. So essentially, we would need each year, beginning in or by 2030, we would need what is today half of the world's production of lithium. Okay, now the problem is that China has mandated 40% of sales to be battery-powered vehicles by the year 2030. But 40% of their 24 million is 10 million vehicles. So that's going to require not 60,000 tons, but maybe as much as 100,000 tons of lithium equivalent, which is 600,000 tons of carbonate, which is essentially everything we're making now. So the world's production of lithium would have to go up by 50% from today. But are we not interested in Europe, which is a larger car market than either the US or China, and which is saying the same thing? They're mandating 50% also. So It doesn't make any difference what the United States Geological Survey, the British Geological Survey, the Japanese say about the amount of lithium in reserve in the world. Reserve is defined as stuff we haven't actually begun to dig up yet. Okay, because the only things that count are deposits high enough in concentration, accessible to our machines, power, water, etc., and with the necessary skilled labor force to produce them at a price that is competitive or at least realistic in the market. Okay. That is the factor nobody's paying attention to.
So given that, in the United States, given the requirement that we source this material in the United States, where is it, and is there enough of it for us to even reasonably begin the process?
In the United States, we have one working brine deposit, and that's in Nevada, and it's, I believe Albemarle owns it, one of the world's top 3 lithium companies. Think about this. Mm-hmm. And it's much smaller than the Mars Candy company. Okay, but it's still one of the world's largest lithium companies. And the point is, they produce 4,000 tons of lithium at that facility a year, 600 or 700 tons of metal. As far as producing mines, now I'm just talking mines mm-hmm. at this point, or deposits. We have this small one in Nevada, and we have in North Carolina, there's some hard rock material that's not yet in production.
Okay. Now, I understand that the Department of Energy estimates that the Salton Sea region of California could produce 600,000 tons annually. Do you feel that's not realistic? You said something about them earlier.
It's not realistic. We have in Nevada clay deposits. Here's the problem. No one has ever produced any lithium commercially from a clay deposit or from a geothermal deposit. Neither mm-hmm. one. Okay. So do we have a lot of lithium contained in the clay in Nevada and maybe the geothermal fluids in California? Yes. But no one has ever been able to produce any of that commercially. And that's the real problem.
So Jack, tell me about how your lithium carbonation process, the one that you're advocating, improves the process compared to the way we think we're going to do it.
The process I'm talking about is selective. Mm-hmm. It can bring out of a water solution of lithium, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, it can selectively remove the lithium as a carbonate without bringing down the other parts of the solution. It also works at fairly low pressures and temperatures, and it only uses carbon dioxide.
So does that mean that it has a lower carbon footprint just to produce the material in the first place? Okay,
much lower, because actually, if you, for example, if you were to use a diesel power plant or burn oil for this process, you would use the carbon dioxide output of that power plant to actually be the selective reagent to bring out the lithium. And remember, the lithium comes out as a carbonate, so there is no exhaust of carbon. Any carbon dioxide you didn't use in the process, you'll use the next. So basically, it's carbon zero, because I know this is difficult to understand. There isn't much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of the Earth. So you have to either bring it, you have to buy it or produce it. There is no exotic chemistry here. Okay. And
does it use less water? Does it use less water and other materials such as toxin?
The point is, once you've removed the lithium, you can also remove the other contaminants mm-hmm. by changing the concentrations of the carbon dioxide, the temperature, and the pressure. This is not the reason I was talking about geothermal. This is nothing like that. These are temperatures and pressures that are easily attainable in a safe way. In chemical reactors, you can buy off the shelf, or at least off the railroad car, because they're sort of big. Okay.
And if we were to implement this process, how much more lithium could we potentially extract over the course of the next decade? Would it be a 50% increase? How would you characterize that?
Well, it's not going to increase the amount of lithium in the world. It's going to decrease the time it takes to produce the lithium.
Okay, but does that mean that we end up with 50% more lithium extracted after 10 years?
In the Atacama Desert in Chile, it takes 18 to 24 months to bring the lithium to a concentration where you can work it and get it out. This is basically a process that works right away. I'm not going to say it's instantaneous, but let's say instead of 18 months, it's more like 18 hours. You could produce huge more. And if you have a big enough reserve, like the brines in the Chilean or Argentinian and Bolivian deserts, okay, you can just start pumping out lithium. Okay. And the United States, our problem is we just don't have that much in the way of brine. But once I get the lithium in solution, like by washing the clay with sulfuric acid, I can also use this process and removing other things from the solution. I can adjust that solution to the point where I can directly carbonate it and selectively remove the lithium. This is the hope here with the process at One World Lithium.
This is really interesting. I want to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back. And we are back to continue the conversation with the Critical Minerals Institute's Jack Lifton. And we're talking about the skyrocketing need for lithium in the era of electrification. Jack, you've criticized U.S. engineering and science policy for failing to keep pace with China's investments. And I know for a fact, that kids in the United States want to be influencers on TikTok more than they want to be scientists, whereas in China, they want to be scientists and astronauts. What investments do you recommend we make as a nation in order to put ourselves back at the forefront of the transition to a new energy platform?
First, I think we have to stop worrying about finding lithium in the United States.
Okay.
What we have to develop here is a processing. We have to be a processing nation. We have to be manufacturers. So what we want is wherever we can get lithium, we want to bring it here and process it into the necessary materials to make lithium-ion batteries. This is exactly what the Chinese have done, except that they have, to their benefit, large brine deposits in their country.
Well, and they've also, through their investments in the Belt and Road initiatives, created a supply line for all of these critical minerals globally.
Correct.
Should we be investing in our infrastructure? And back to the very beginning of our conversation, we were talking about the fact this isn't a war. How will we cooperate, say, for instance, with South American countries to help lift them into the electrification era by doing these partnerships?
Well, the real problem for us is that the South American nations that have the majority of the world's lithium as in brine are nationalizing the material. For example, Chile has nationalized its lithium industry. Mexico has nationalized its lithium industry. And what you're saying is unfortunately what our policymakers ignored. These countries don't want to just be suppliers of raw materials. They want to come into what we are telling them is the good life. All the battery powered toys, cars, television, things like, portable things, and alternate energy. So the mistake we've made is we didn't tell them we will help you develop domestic industry. In return, you can pay us with lithium. Guess who did exactly that? That's right, your friends in China. And that they are now, of course, the Chinese are unhappy with Chile nationalizing lithium, but they have immediately told them they'll build batteries in Chile and cars.
And that's negotiation. And what you're describing is a different approach to the getting ahead. and rather than we get ahead and you guys just, live with what you can, we need to raise all boats, to go back to a way of thinking in the 60s.
That's right. And well, the problem in America is that we have completely been captured by the financial world. To in our country, making money, not creating wealth, is the goal. Okay. And that's the real problem, because if our policymakers had a goal of creating wealth, they would realize that cooperating with places like Chile, Argentina, even Bolivia, okay, by saying we can supply you with the technology you need to raise yourself up into the technological age. One of the big problems is, can we do that? Because in the United States, we don't have a single lithium hydroxide, but lithium hydroxide is a precursor for batteries. Albemarle is supposedly, they said they're building $1.5 billion such plant somewhere in the US right now. Okay, great. China today produces 80% of the world's batteries. They process 60% of the world's lithium.
Yep.
We don't have any of that infrastructure at all. And for us to say to Chile or even Mexico, we'll help you out, they're just as Lois Lane asked Superman as they were falling down in front of the Empire State Building, when he said, "I've got you," and she said to him, "Who's got you?" Well, my question is, who's got us? We can't even tell our friends in Europe we're gonna help them, because we can't. We don't have the infrastructure here. So Americans don't like to wait. They think that they have instant gratification is our problem. If we had a national industrial policy, don't tell me, oh my God, that's a fascist thing. That's a real thing for nations that have a goal. So if we had an industrial policy, we were following it, it wouldn't matter who was in the White House. But every time we have a change of president or a party control of the so-called Congress, then boom, policy changes. China has been on this policy for 15 years.
Now, but you've several times obliquely criticized the Inflation Reduction Act, which is completely ill-named. It's the beginning of an industrial policy to drive electrification. How can we improve that?
It's my understanding that the Defense Production Act, which everyone speaks of Title III, which is they put money into the national economy to produce critical materials. Nobody talks about Title VII, which is the president shall call on the industrialists in the United States to advise him on solving the problems. Okay, now, my group of curmudgeons, old guys who had a lot of experience in this, we all talk all the time, email, and none of us have ever been asked by the national government to advise them.
Okay, so is that really the next step? We need, in some sense, to convene a national conversation about where we want to go?
No, we need a national conversation of what's possible.
Okay.
We know where we want to go. Okay. Well, we just don't know how to get there. Okay. And government doesn't know, because government has no experience of manufacturing engineering.
So the companies that are driving these initiatives are also potentially something that our listeners are interested in investing in. And
Yes.
Over the course of the past few years, lithium ETFs, exchange traded funds, have not performed so well. How would you, if I wanted to put $10,000 of my money to work today to support an industrial evolution, where would you put that money?
In a major, like, I'm not an investment advisor, so I'm just telling
Sure,
you.
and I'm not asking you for advice. I just am curious about your opinion.
I think that no matter what, Albemarle will be around. The lithium company that's been here in one form or another for a century. Okay, and they have lithium was a minor material until Elon Musk came on the scene. Believe me, And today it's not a minor material, but you don't just become an expert by going to school and getting a degree. That's silly. You need experience.
Mhm.
And the only legacy experience we have in America are companies like Albemarle, which have been doing this kind of, and by the way, DuPont, even Dow Chemical. All of these companies have been looking at this, and they know how to process things. They know how to make high purity chemicals. They've been doing this, DuPont 2 centuries, Dow a century, Albemarle at least more than half a century, because I remember their predecessor in interest when I was a boy. So I wouldn't get involved with the new companies, because the new companies, in case you haven't noticed, are only talking about mining.
Mhm.
Processing is the problem,
Okay.
not mining. Processing.
So the other question that I have when I look at the trends in lithium investing is, are investors hedging, thinking that there are other materials or structures like a solid state battery that might do better? And what is your opinion about alternatives?
A friend of mine, who's professor at UC Berkeley, and is battery expert, he and I gave talks together for it for many years.
Mhm.
He made a point to me. He said, what I don't think people understand is that the solid state lithium ion battery uses 40% more lithium than the one with the liquid electrolyte. He said, so you can go a solid state, but it's gonna be even more expensive to make.
Okay.
And require more raw material. Okay. The other thing that's going to happen, people are going to say to you, they will come up with sodium batteries, potassium batteries, ring baloney batteries. Okay. Don't you think that the battery scientists, and there are people like that, who've been looking at storage batteries since 1840, have worked out what is the best system, the one that you can actually make and deploy. And it turns out that highest energy density system that you can make, deploy, and will cycle 500 or 1,000 times is the lithium ion battery. Now, there's all kinds of batteries possible. Okay. What I can tell you this, 60 years ago, I did some work at Ford Scientific as a graduate student. We were working on what was called a sodium sulfur battery. It was a molten pot of sodium sulfide, and then other molten pots of different sodium salts, because sulfide was dangerous. Okay. And we made a battery that could be used to start a car. Nobody was thinking about running a car. Okay.
Right.
And then moved into, could you run the car, a battery off of this? Well, I remember a conversation. I remember a demonstration of a molten sodium salt battery, 600 degrees Fahrenheit, in a ceramic box.
That's practical.
Well, no. Well, the point is that the scientists at Ford Scientific was a great place, because no one was telling us what to do. It was Henry Ford II took a particular interest in that place, and he said it's for R&D. Okay, so we did that, and the men from engineering looked at the professor, I won't name him, okay, who had devised this. They said, so let's get this straight. A large ceramic box, 600 degrees Fahrenheit, under the hood of a Mustang. And he said, sure. And they said, okay, next, thank you. And we never.
Yeah, well, that's the point, right? I mean, you can imagine all these things, but they still have to fit into the form factor of the device. And so here, it sounds like what you're saying is we have to push all our chips in on lithium if we want to make this transition.
Yeah, it's only in unpopular mechanics that you see the miracle, sodium batteries, will replace lithium, forget about it, blah blah blah. This is all nonsense. Okay, it's what you can manufacture at a price people can afford, that won't kill them and will last long enough to recover its value.
Okay, so and this I need to wrap this up, and I want to try to put a bow on it. So if you remember the movie The Graduate, or if you read the book The Graduate,
Sure, no, I
there's
saw
a moment where Benjamin Braddock is cornered by a gentleman at his graduation party, and he
Yes.
says, "Son, one word: plastics." And of course, plastics have taken over the world.
Right.
What is your advice to somebody who wants to change the world today? What should they go into as a category of study, and what would they work on?
Boy, that's a hard question, because the fact is that we were fine until the electric car came along. I'll tell you what I mean. The difference between 1945 and 2005 was that we had miniaturized electronics. You had a cell phone to fit in your pocket. Instead of one, you needed a wheelbarrow to carry.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a computer you could literally put in your pocket. Okay. You had lights that no longer burned filaments. LEDs. They could go, and they from our point of view as humans, they last forever. Okay. We had miniaturized everything. So everybody in the technologically developing world walked around with a few grams of neodymium, lithium, germanium, micrograms of germanium,
Yeah.
and everything was fine. Then along came Elon Musk, and he said, no, we need tons of these things per unit, per consumer unit. That completely made the world go upside down, the world of critical materials. Because I did a study in 2007, lithium I classed as a rare metal. There was more silver produced each year in 2007 than lithium. What happened? Okay, today we're talking about silver is still produced at about 20,000 tons a year. And now we're talking at lithium, we need 1 million tons a year. Okay, now, just where is that going to come from? The point I'm making is that if I were a young man and I believed this situation would continue, I would go into mining engineering. Now, that's never going to happen to the TikTok generation. Please keep in mind, you don't select scientists, they select themselves. Kids who say, I'm really interested in math and physics, and I'd love to know, how an atom is constructed. You can't make somebody do that. They have to want to do it. Yeah. So the selection mechanism is fierce. Now, in China, you can say, you want the good life? Then they give a test. Every kid in China takes an exam at the age of 18. The top, they go to the best schools, and they want you to be in the STEM subjects. I don't believe the Chinese select for gender studies or anything like that. I don't think they have those curricula. But the point is, they know that the selection method is fierce. And as you know, in Germany, kids are given a choice. You want to go to trade school or college. And of course, you have to qualify for these. And what we've forgotten in America is that merit is colorblind. Okay.
So going back to Ben Braddock and the moment with the one word, what you're really saying is it's not one word, it's one acronym, which is STEM, science, technology, engineering.
Very good. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Now, given all of that, and this has been a complex conversation, if you had 10 minutes with the president now, what would you say in a nutshell?
I'd say rework the Department of Education.
Really? Okay. And heavily invest in it?
No, that's bullshit.
Okay.
It's not money you need.
Okay.
Try to find those Americans who want to do STEM. Okay. Find them. I don't care what color they are, what kind of sex they like. Okay. Find them and nurture them. Okay. And as young as you can. You can't make people do things. You have to find people who want, I mean, if you could create an Einstein every week, that you would do that, wouldn't you? Well, then why
in the long run,
we?
it might in the long run diminish the value of an Einstein because of oversupply.
But that doesn't matter.
Exactly.
We desperately need STEM here. And the other thing is, please try to understand that without legacy engineering, you're dead. We are not taking advantage. We have people here who have done all of this chemical processing. They're all old men and a few women.
Mm-hmm.
They sit wondering why nobody asked them anything. And the idea in Washington is that here's a book that says how to make a nuclear submarine. You guys take that and build me a submarine. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? Yeah. Then why do you think it's possible to take a book and make lithium-ion batteries?
So to your point about experience that you made earlier in our conversation, really what that STEM activation is give these aspirational youngsters the opportunity to have the experience of doing good science that it makes a change in the world.
Fast track them.
Yeah.
Find them and fast track them. Just like China is doing, Germany did. That's why those nations got to where they were.
I think that's a clear call to action, Jack, and I want to thank you for spending time to talk with us about this today. How can people keep up with what you do?
I try to write a weekly column in investorintel.com. And that's how I mainly communicate with the outside world.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
We've been speaking with Jack Lifton. He's with the Critical Minerals Institute. And you can find his regular columns at investorintel.com. Investor Intel is all one word, no space, no dash, investorintel.com. And you can learn more about the Critical Minerals Institute at criticalmineralsinstitute.com. Again, no spaces, no dashes. The science fiction author William S. Gibson said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And it's beneficial to listen to somebody who's lived through quite a bit of history, as Jack has. It's an idea, this idea of distribution, that we need to keep in mind during the energy transition. At the moment, the materials and processes for rapid electrification are concentrated not in the United States, but in China. Instead, we need to negotiate to create shared benefits, not just with the Chinese, but with all of the nations of the world, particularly in the global south, that have components of the solutions that we need to build, and we need to build them together. Without referencing them, to some degree, Jack is talking about the principles embodied in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which emphasize not just the transition to renewable energy, but to social and economic equity for the North and the South, so that we're all living in one advanced and healthy and equitable economy. We are at the moment when tons of metals that used to be consumed by the gram are necessary to make the leap to an electric, low-carbon economy. Lithium, if it is the best material for battery manufacturing, and that generally seems to be everybody's belief, it's the pivotal element of our time, and we need to figure out how to make enough of it without also destroying the planet, both to build batteries for cars and to provide energy storage backup on the electric grid. STEM education needs to be easily accessible to every kid who wants to change the world. It's a dream that America has embodied at various times. Finding and supporting youth interested in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is the key to an American energy renaissance. This was a complicated, but I think valuable conversation, and one that helps us continue to keep our eye on history as the foundation for understanding the new questions that we're facing today. And I hope you'll take a few minutes to share this podcast or any of the others that we've done for sustainability in your ear with your friends, family, your coworkers. Write a review on your favorite podcast platform, please. It will help your neighbors find us. Tell them you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of the other fine purveyors of podcast goodness they may prefer. Thank you so much, folks, for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911. We will be back with another innovator interview soon. But in the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.